Why do we keep repeating the same patterns in life? Why do certain people, emotions, and experiences feel so familiar, even when they're new? The answer lies not in your personality or your habits, but in something far deeper in your archetype. In this video, we're going to uncover the 7 hidden archetypes that silently shape your identity, your relationships, and even your destiny. If you've ever felt lost, conflicted, or unsure of who you truly are, what you're about to discover will bring clarity that changes everything. The individual believes he is a singular being, a unified identity marching forward through time. But this is a comforting illusion. The self, as most know it, is only the surface. The ego, a thin layer of awareness shaped by external validation, social conditioning, and conscious memory. Beneath this facade exists a far more intricate structure of the psyche, layered, contradictory, and alive with forces far older than language. It is not the ego that truly governs your decisions, your desires, or your fate. It is the interplay of archetypes, primordial symbols embedded deep within the unconscious, that cast the real vote. The ego clings to its narrative because it fears dissolution. It is built to protect, to maintain coherence, to define boundaries. Those boundaries are paper. Then when you encounter dream states, irrational compulsions, or emotional storms that seem to come from nowhere, what rises in those moments is not the ego, but the archetypal energies. The ancient patterns that belong not just to you, but to all of humanity. You are not merely a product of your personal experience, you are also the expression of a vast collective inheritance. The hero who strives, the child who wonders, the shadow who resents, the sage who knows, all live within, competing for expression. To become conscious of these inner figures is not a matter of intellectual analysis, but of deep inner confrontation. When you react strongly to someone, whether in admiration or disgust, it is often one of your own archetypes projected outward. You are not seeing them, you are seeing yourself. What you love and what you hate in others reveals the roles you have embraced or exiled within your own psyche. And until these roles are made conscious, they will act upon your life without your awareness. You will call it fate. But it is only the consequence of what you refuse to acknowledge. Each stage of life brings forward a new dominant archetype. The child's safety and wonder, the warrior seeks conquest and identity. The lover seeks union and meaning. The sage seeks understanding and detachment. These energies are not linear, nor are they fixed. They circle back, overlap, regress, and evolve. Times you will feel 2 archetypes in conflict, such as when the warrior within you seeks power while the lover longs for connection, your authority. These internal wars are not signs of weakness. They are the Psyche's way of inviting you to reconcile opposites and grow into a fuller version of yourself. The archetypes are not static ideas. They are dynamic forces. They come alive in images, myths, stories, and dreams. You don't learn them, you remember them, as though they've been with you all along. This is why certain characters in films or books stir something profound within you. They are mirrors of your own inner world. The tyrant you despise, the savior you worship, the fool who makes you laugh. They are all parts of your internal structure, knocking at the door of your awareness. To ignore them is to be ruled by them in secret. To recognize them is to reclaim the power they hold. But awareness alone is not enough. The journey is to integrate these archetypes, not to become possessed by one, nor to reject another, but to bring them all into dialogue. This is not a path of control, but of listening. Each archetype has its wisdom, its danger, its gift. The shadow carries repressed potential. The lover reveals emotional depth. The warrior brings strength and focus. The sage offers clarity and humility. When one dominates at the expense of the others, imbalance occurs. This imbalance often manifests as addiction, depression, anxiety, or self-sabotage, signs that the Psyche is demanding a more complete version of you to emerge. What most people call identity is really just the ego's attempt to cling to one archetype while denying the others. But wholeness does not come from narrowing yourself into a single role. It comes from embracing the totality of your inner cast of characters, learning to live with their contradictions, and allowing them to inform your actions without enslaving your will. You are not a monologue, you are a chorus. The shadow is the great hidden twin of the personality, the dark sibling you were never encouraged to meet. It is everything you deny, suppress, or disown within yourself. It is the resentment behind your smile, the jealousy behind your praise, the rage buried beneath your politeness. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply what your ego cannot accept as part of itself. And what is not accepted is banished to the unconscious, where it gains power and secrecy. The more you ignore it, the more it guides your life from the shadows, directing your behaviors, your projections, your irrational fears, and your compulsions. And yet, people speak of evil as something outside them, as if they were pure beings corrupted only by the world, when in fact the deepest threat lies within. No one is exempt from the shadow. The saint has one, the scholar has one, and so does the humble. In fact, the more virtuous a person appears, the more likely they have repressed a powerful, unseen darkness. The need to appear good is often the most dangerous mask the psyche wears, for behind it lies unresolved aggression, unspoken envy, and a desire for dominance disguised as compassion. What you disown does not disappear. It festers, and eventually it erupts. In your relationships, your language, your choices, and your suffering, the person who proclaims themselves free of darkness is often ruled by it most. The shadow cannot be destroyed, nor should it be. It is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be integrated. To know your shadow is to reclaim the energy it holds. In it lie the passions you abandoned to meet societal standards, the instincts you muted to gain approval, the creative wildness you silenced in the name of order. Repressing the shadow fragments the soul. Embracing it returns wholeness. But to embrace it requires courage, honesty, and above all, willingness to see yourself not as you wish to be, but as you truly are. This confrontation does not come in moments of peace. It arrives in conflict. When someone infuriates you without reason, when a person's behavior disturbs you more than it should, when you see flaws in others that echo a voice within you. These are the footsteps of the shadow. You are not angry because of what they are. You are angry because of what they reveal about you. The ego deflects blame outward. The shadow invites you to look inward. And what you find there is uncomfortable because it shatters the idealized image of yourself you've so carefully constructed. But it also offers liberation because once you face your darkness, no longer controls you. Dreams, too, are messengers of the shadow. Figures in your dreams who frighten, insult, or humiliate you often represent the parts of yourself you have abandoned. They come dressed in symbols, animals, strangers, grotesque shapes. Not to deceive, to bypass the rational mind. The unconscious speaks in metaphor because the truth it carries cannot be swallowed directly. Each recurring nightmare, each haunting image, each strange obsession, these are cries from the shadow, demanding recognition. To ignore them is to be haunted. To listen is to be transformed. The process of integrating the shadow is not about moral perfection. It is about psychological completeness. It means allowing your aggression to speak without letting it rule. It means seeing your manipulations without shaming yourself. It means recognizing your capacity for destruction alongside your desire for creation. The goal is not to become harmless but whole. Wholeness includes the light and the dark, the divine and the profane, the wise and the wounded. A person who has made peace with their shadow becomes dangerous, not to others, but to falsehood, illusion, and self-deception. Their words carry weight because they do not hide from themselves. Those who integrate their shadow do not become saints. They become real. They become grounded, aware, and unpredictable. Their choices are no longer governed by fear of judgment or the need for approval. They have seen the worst within themselves and did not flinch. And that self-knowledge, that raw clarity, gives them a strange serenity in the face of chaos. They no longer need to project their shadow onto the world. They know where it lies, they walk beside it, and in doing so, they become free from it. The anima and animus are not merely poetic notions of inner femininity and masculinity. They are the deep psychic structures that bridge the conscious self to the unconscious world. In every man lives an anima, his inner woman, shaped not only by his mother and early experiences with the feminine, but by centuries of archetypal memory. Likewise, within every woman exists the animus, her inner man, formed through her father, her interactions with the masculine, and the collective masculine ideal stored deep within the psyche. These are not gendered roles or modern stereotypes. They are living energies, subtle yet overwhelming, that shape our dreams, product onto our partners, and color every romantic desire, every idealization, and every disappointment. When a man falls in love too quickly, when he sees a woman not as she is but as something divine, untouchable, or redemptive, he is not seeing her. He is seeing his anima. This internal feminine image, born of imagination and ancient psychic inheritance, casts itself onto real women, causing him to worship or resent them in ways that have nothing to do with their actual being. He is pulled not toward a person, but toward a symbol. The woman becomes a vessel for his own unconscious longing, his own need to connect with what he has neglected inside himself. Emotion, depth, vulnerability, the irrational, the intuitive. The tragedy lies in mistaking this projection for love, and when the illusion breaks, as it always must, he either turns bitter or confused, unable to understand why the goddess became ordinary. For women, the animus works in a different but equally deceptive way. It manifests as the voice of rigid logic, harsh certainty, or a cold inner critic. At times, it appears as the ideal man, a strong, protective, assertive force that she projects onto real men. She might feel attracted to those who reflect her inner animus, often drawn to power, intellect, or stoic strength. But she may also find herself battling this figure internally, feeling constantly judged or dominated by an unseen masculine authority with her own thoughts. Just as the man is driven by a longing to merge with the anima, the woman can be dominated or seduced by the animus. He may whisper commands to her, not in the outer world, but inside her psyche, insisting on achievement over feeling, control over intuition, criticism over compassion. The danger is not in having an anima or animus. The danger lies in being possessed by them. When these forces remain unconscious, they become tyrants. They distort relationships, turning lovers into battlegrounds for inner wars. They blind individuals to who stands before them. Instead of intimacy, there is projection. Instead of connection, there is illusion. The man projects his anima onto a woman, then demands she live up to a role she never agreed to play. The woman projects her animus onto a man, then resents him when he falls short of an ideal built in her own unconscious. And so relationships break not because love is absent, but because the archetypes are unrecognized. To begin the work of individuation, one must first make these inner figures conscious. A man must learn to meet his anima not in the face of every woman he admires, in the recesses of his own emotional world. He must learn to feel, to listen to his dreams, to acknowledge the irrational within himself without shame. Only then can he meet a woman not as an object of projection, but as an individual. Likewise, a woman must confront the animus within, listen to his voice, question it, and see where it rules her without consent. She must reclaim her softness, her chaos, her feeling nature, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Only then can she meet a man without seeing a tyrant, a savior, or a phantom of her mind. These inner opposites are not enemies. They are guides. The anima can lead a man into the depths of his soul, revealing beauty, creativity, and emotional truth. The animus can provide a woman with clarity, decisiveness, and inner authority. But first they must be seen, not projected. They must be known within, not searched for without. The path to the self runs through these archetypes, and unless they are confronted, the path will always be diverted by the illusion of love, the pain of betrayal, and the tragedy of never truly seeing another person for who they are. Among the 7 archetypes that shape the human psyche, the shadow stands as the most terrifying and the most transformative. It is the repository of all that the ego rejects, denies, or fears. Every emotion that was deemed inappropriate in childhood, every instinct society deemed dangerous, every impulse that could not be assimilated into the persona, the carefully constructed mask one wears for the world, is banished into the unconscious, where it festers, waits, grows stronger. But the shadow is not simply a garbage heap of suppressed traits. It is alive, dynamic, and intelligent. It is the dark twin of the self, and until one chooses to face it, it rules silently from within, disguising itself in projection, in moral superiority, in unconscious aggression and passive despair. The tragedy of modern man is his worship of light without understanding the necessity of darkness. He identifies with goodness, virtue, intelligence, and reason, disowns his envy, rage, cowardice, lust, and pride. He believes he is compassionate, unaware of how deeply his kindness is driven by guilt or fear. He believes he is tolerant, while secretly boiling with judgment. The more he denies the shadow, the more it gains control. It creeps into his words, actions, relationships. It contaminates his purity with hypocrisy. He sees his flaws not in himself, but in others, enemies, partners, strangers. In them he sees the liar, the cheat, the narcissist, the coward, never realizing that these projections are not about them, but about him. His unconscious is using others as mirrors, desperate to draw his attention to the disowned parts of his soul. The individual who refuses to face their shadow becomes its slave. This slavery is not always loud or violent. Sometimes it manifests as chronic guilt, as sabotage of love and ambition, as anxiety that cannot be explained. At times it takes the form of inexplicable hatred toward another, or obsessive attraction, or a cruel pleasure in seeing others fall. The shadow is not evil. It is simply everything that has not been integrated. It is morally neutral, a raw psychic energy that can destroy or create depending on how it is wielded, and the one who begins to confront it will feel its heat like fire. Scorching, terrifying, but necessary for transformation. The encounter with the shadow always humbling. It is the moment a man realizes he is not as noble as he thought, not as rational, not as innocent. It is the hour when a woman sees that behind her smile is rage, behind her patience is control, behind her selflessness is pride. To face the shadow is to strip the ego of its illusions. It is to realize that one is not the hero of the story, but also the villain, the saboteur, the betrayer. This confrontation does not occur in daylight. It happens in dreams, in breakdowns, in the mirror of failed relationships and repeated mistakes. It appears the thing most hated in others, the very qualities that provoke disgust or fear, because the shadow knows that projection is the unconscious way of pointing the finger at itself. Yet to integrate the shadow is to reclaim a source of immense power. Hidden within the shadow are the capacities the ego deemed dangerous: assertiveness, sexuality, ambition, primal wisdom, creativity, even divine madness. The energy that was once locked away as shame can be transformed into authenticity. The one who integrates their shadow becomes whole. Not perfect, but real. They no longer need to pretend. They no longer need to control others or themselves with such rigidity. They see others more clearly because they see themselves more honestly. They stop trying to appear good and instead become grounded, centered, human. This integration is not a one-time event, but a lifelong task. The shadow evolves as we evolve. New levels of consciousness bring new layers of unconsciousness. The more light one generates, the more shadow one casts. And so the work continues, noticing the triggers, examining the envy, following the path of emotional reactions back to their source. Through this inner work, one becomes less a puppet of the unconscious and more its master, not by denying its existence, but by welcoming it, dialoguing with it, giving it form through art, writing, confession, and reflection. The individual becomes a container for paradox, a being who contains both light and dark, good and evil, order and chaos. And in this holding of opposites, deeper kind of self is born. The archetype of the self is not merely another aspect of the psyche. It is the central organizing principle of one's inner world. It is not the ego, which believes itself to be in control, but rather the deeper totalic, the personality, the conscious and unconscious in dynamic interaction, seeking wholeness. It represents the unification of opposites, the source and the destination, the force that calls a person toward individuation, that long and painful journey toward integration and meaning. The self is symbolized in myths and dreams as the mandala, the divine child, the wise old man, the sacred tree, hidden treasure. It is that which emerges when one has faced all other archetypes and survived their trials, not by conquering them, by understanding and integrating their truths. Most people never come to know the self. They confuse it with their identity, their ambitions, their roles, or their desires. They believe their job, their nationality, their gender, or their beliefs are who they are. But these are fragments, necessary but incomplete. The self transcends these masks. It holds within it both the masculine and the feminine, both the saint and the sinner, the victim and the perpetrator. It does not seek purity, but completeness. It speaks in paradoxes, in images, in symbols, and it comes not through achievement, but through surrender. The more the ego tightens its grip, the more distant the self becomes. It does not shout, it whispers, and only those who have silenced the chaos within can hear its voice. The path to the self is the path of individuation, and this path is not linear. It demands sacrifice, often of the very things one holds dear, the need to be liked, to be right, to be comfortable. It demands a descent into the unconscious, into the places one has feared, the memories one has suppressed, the desires one has denied. It is in the encounter with the shadow that the first glimpse of the self often appears. One sees that what one thought was evil was simply misunderstood. Your authority, that was feared, becomes a teacher. That which was hated becomes a mirror. And as one accepts these fragments, they are not merely added to the personality, they are transformed. The self does not promise peace in the conventional sense. It does not promise safety. Instead, offers depth, resonance, and meaning. It reveals that one's suffering was not random, that the patterns repeated throughout life were not mistakes, but messages. It shows how each heartbreak, each betrayal, each failure was not meant to destroy but to awaken. This realization cannot be taught. It must be experienced. It arrives in dreams of circular symbols, of reunions of golden children, or transcendent landscapes. It arrives in the moment one feels both deep sorrow and deep love at the same time, in the moment the inner and outer world suddenly feel aligned. The self is not static, is not an end point. It is a process, a mystery that unfolds over a lifetime. Even the one who has seen glimpses of it may lose touch, falling back into inflation or spiritual bypassing. The self does not make one superior, it makes one more human. It softens arrogance and deepens humility. It destroys the fantasy of perfection and replaces it with authenticity. It calls for courage because to follow the self means to walk a path that often defies society's rules, family expectations, and even personal goals. It may call one to leave everything familiar, or to stay and change everything from within. But it always calls. Those who walk the path of the self develop a quiet power. They are no longer easily manipulated, for they know their own motives. They are no longer easily impressed, for they have tasted the eternal. They do not need to dominate, for they have mastered themselves. Their presence heals, not because they try to heal, but because they radiate integrity. They become individuals in the trust sense. Undivided within themselves, their words carry weight. Their silence carries even more. And wherever they go, the unconscious of others begins to stir, recognizing them a reflection of something long forgotten. To journey into the Psyche is not escape the world, but to truly enter it. With eyes unclouded by illusion, each archetype reveals not who we ought to be, but we already are beneath layers of conditioning, denial, and fear. The warrior, the lover, the sage, the rebel, the creator, the shadow, and finally, the self. These are not external roles to play but internal truths to awaken. They are not aspirations but realities waiting to be remembered. As one moves through these archetypal patterns, life itself transforms. Challenges become initiations, relationships become mirrors, suffering becomes alchemy. The individual becomes not a puppet of fate, but a conscious participant in the unfolding of a myth uniquely their own. To meet these archetypes is to reclaim fragments of the soul scattered by time, trauma, and distraction. It is to step beyond good and evil, beyond success and failure, into a deeper alignment with something ancient, mysterious, and whole. Few dare to walk this road. It offers no quick answers, no easy victories. But for those who persist, a different kind of power emerges. Not the power to control others, but the power to no longer be controlled by the unconscious. A grounded sovereignty, a fierce compassion, a clarity that pierces through noise. In knowing these inner figures, one becomes less a product of society and more a vessel of depth and meaning. One no longer drifts, one becomes rooted, one no longer reacts, one responds. And in this silent transformation, at your authority, the individual rediscovers what the world has long forgotten, the quiet majesty of a human being who has remembered who they are.